And welcome to the latest edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your co-host, Kahari Mosley, here with my illustrious co-hosts and colleagues, Miracle Jones and Ryan White in the building. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a great uh, episode tonight. We're going to be talking about a very important issue that you may or may not have heard about, judicial gerrymandering in the state of Pennsylvania. I know that's a lot of word salad, but we have three experts from the state of Pennsylvania. I'm here to talk about that. But before we get into that, another week has elapsed in 2021. And let's go around and do some quick takes before we bring on our illustrious panel. So, Miracle, what is your first hot take for tonight?
My first hot take is I don't think the Super Bowl was worth people risking their lives this weekend. But I hope people are safe and quarantining now that they're returning home. There's a lot of stuff going on. In addition, the impeachment trial is supposed to start this weekend. This week. So I just hope that the next couple of weeks give us factual information and we're able to absorb everything and people just stay safe. So I think that's two of the biggest things going on in the country right now. People trying to get home and this impeachment trial starting.
Absolutely. Ryan, always great to be with you. Share with us your hot takes.
Most definitely. First of all, I just want to agree with Miracle. That really wasn't even a good game at all. So, even without a pandemic, like I probably wouldn't have watched, more than like 3/4 of that. But along the same lines, I'd say one of my bigger hot takes is probably that I seem to be the only person in Pittsburgh who's not furious that Antonio Brown got a Super Bowl ring now. I know he's got, his own allegations and everything, so I'm not going to say I'm a diehard fan still, but I seem to be the only Pittsburgher who's not, completely up in arms about him getting a ring. But yeah, just some other news around the state. One of our recent guests, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, just declared that he'll be running for Senate. So it'll be interesting to see as we get closer to that who all will be running against him and also vying for that seat. We got over 250,000, I believe, of people who are fully vaccinated for COVID in PA now, which again, it's been a slow, difficult process thus far, but it's still nice to see some milestones like that. But yeah, so that's some of the stuff that's been going on around PA recently.
Absolutely. Yeah, you had to add me to the club. Like, it really didn't, bother me. The AB, got his touchdown, got his Super Bowl ring, it just seemed like they, put a really good team together. And I think one of the stories, in all of the Tom Brady adulation that's been lost is, how diverse the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, coaching staff was. And really, Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator, former coach of the New York Jets, shouted out by Phife Dawg, in the last Tribe Called Quest album, he did the thing. I mean, that was it is probably going to be a blueprint for how people are going to attack the Chiefs in the in the future. Up to this point, the Chiefs had never been shut down ever under Patrick Mahomes, but he was hurt too. You could tell. He was definitely not himself physically.
Yeah, he just had no time either. Like that,
right.
He never had a chance. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So shout out to Temple University in the house. You know what I mean? I know Temple University people are super amped about their university, and that's dope. My man Davu Flint, for those of y'all know Davu, well-known Pittsburgh artist, world traveler, always shouting out Temple U. And my man Aaron Simpson, who went to Temple, I went to high school with. He's a big Temple guy too. Yeah. So Miracle, anything else out there that we should know about as we go into this new week?
I think Ryan touched on it a little bit about the vaccinations going on. There's been a lot of controversy there's being a limited supply. Some governors aren't extending the categories for people to get vaccinated. Philly, there was a controversy with the person, who was hired to do the rollout program. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And so we do hope that in the coming weeks, not only is there an extended rollout period for people to get vaccinated if they so choose, that there is a lot more transparency that goes around with the data that is being collected, because there's also issues of people's race and ethnicities not being collected, so then we don't have an accurate portrayal of who's getting the vaccine, who has access to it. We know people are leaving their neighborhoods and going to other neighborhoods to get vaccinated. So there's a lot of stuff going on in regards to that. So hopefully in the midst of this global pandemic, we're able to take a lot of steps. We know teachers are returning to in classroom teaching, and that's caused some disturbances in Chicago and Atlanta. And so we're just trying to see how that plays out, as well as also keeping our eye on the Alabama union vote for Amazon. That's supposed to happen tomorrow. So hopefully some fair, equitable practices and safe practices goes for there. So that's pretty much the hot takes that are going on right now.
And Mary, could you just elaborate a little bit more on that issue in Alabama with Amazon? Because obviously, I spent 8 years working on labor issues, and I think one thing about people in our generations, Gen X millennials, don't really remember a lot of the labor fights of the past, and don't necessarily, even when their parents and grandparents were in unions, kind of I always saw a disconnect to how younger Americans kind of see how they connect to the labor movement. So if you could just talk a little bit more about it for our viewers so they can understand that issue.
Yes. So in Alabama, and it's primarily being pushed by rural Black women in Alabama, Amazon is one of the companies that was working. They came in, they changed a lot of the rules and regulations so that Amazon is one of the employers that's had the largest percentage in America of employees testing positive for COVID-19. Some of the allegations are that people were not given proper PPE, that they were told that they could not take sick leave, that because they're not all full-time, they don't even, some people don't have the option for sick leave. People were losing pay. There was an issue of Amazon taking tips away from some of their workers. There was also an issue of forcing people to stand for their complete 10-hour shifts, docking them when they went on breaks and lunches. It's gotten so bad that there was allegations that Amazon paid city officials to change the way traffic lights worked, so people could not do union activities at stoplights, since people weren't able to do union activities on the job. There are allegations that people were terminated and fired for trying to unionize. Again, there's not a lot of benefits. People are literally getting injured and sick going to work at these facilities. And so if this vote goes as planned tomorrow, Alabama will be the first union in the whole entire Amazon distribution workforce that's able to unionize and have worker rights and benefits.
And in the last thing I'll say, could you talk about what that means, like in the South? As we know, the South isn't, typically associated with heavy union activity. Many of those states are what they call right to work states, where unions have more obstacles to organize in, as opposed to many states in the North and in the West.
Yes. So for a right to work state, it basically means you can be fired for any reason. You don't have to have cause. Those are traditionally associated with removing rights for African Americans after slavery. And again, after the civil rights movement, you saw a lot of union busting that became more widespread. And so if this goes into effect, and if they're successful, it will basically change the trajectory of how labor rights are perceived in the South. And again, this is coming after the Warnock-Ossoff win in Georgia, because you see a lot more Black and brown organizers really putting in work here in the South and creating new systems so people are able to engage and hold a lot of these contractors, corporations, public officials accountable. And so if this would be, again, the first union shop at an Amazon factory, if this goes according to a positive vote, which is projected to do tomorrow evening.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. That's so important. As we, deal with, social rights issues and environmental justice issues is, what the labor fight, still means for so many people around the country. So now we're going to go into our incredible panel for tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about judicial gerrymandering. There is an effort by Republicans in the Pennsylvania Assembly to change the way that we elect our appellate court judges. Our appellate courts are the Superior Court, the Commonwealth Court, and the state Supreme Court. Currently, those elections and those people are chosen in elections, rather, statewide. What the change would do would create almost like legislative style districts for the judicial candidates, and people would run in districts across the state as opposed to running statewide. And there's a lot of issue to be concerned about that. And we're going to welcome our incredible panel tonight. Our first guest is Khadijah Kenner from the PAA Policy and Budget Center. Definitely a first ballot all-stater, born in Western Pennsylvania, raised in Southeastern Pennsylvania, went to Temple University. Like PA through and through. We're so excited to have Khadijah Kenner on tonight. We also have Khalif Ali from Common Cause, one of my really good friends from the Pittsburgh area, is now doing work statewide. And we also have Marie Albajez, who's doing fantastic journalism at Spotlight PA. So let's welcome our panel, and we're going to talk about this very, very important issue that's extremely timely and relevant. A lot of things are going to be happening around this issue. So welcome to the show. We're so excited. My good friend, JJ Abbott, who's well known as the former press secretary for Governor Wolf, and who I've got to know after he graduated from Pitt and really began his illustrious career, said the panel was fire. So, JJ Abbott thinks the panel is fire. That's a great, great endorsement. So welcome to the show. I want to start with Khadijah, welcome. And again, I said you're all state, Southwestern PA, Southeastern PA. Are you going to run for governor one day or something? I mean, you
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, you have the perfect resume, but in all seriousness, I wanted to ask you the first question. You talk a little bit about why this issue is so important and some of the work that you've been doing with the Pennsylvania Policy and Budget Center on it.
Yeah, so we've been pushing back on independence of our judiciary for years now with the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. One of those efforts began, after the big election that changed the way the judiciary currently looks in 2015. But it really took hold in 2018 when our Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that our 2011 congressional maps were unconstitutional and that they were gerrymandered, that they were drawn to benefit a political party. And so they changed those maps for us. And that was a ruling that the Republicans didn't like. And they wanted to punish the Pennsylvania Supreme Court at that time. They went as far as to draft articles to impeach our Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices. Representative Chris Dush, he's now State Senator Chris Dush out of Jefferson, Indiana counties, out towards your more direction. He wanted to impeach the Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices for the decisions that came out of those courts. And that's a relic out of Jim Crow, when we talk about trying to impeach justices based upon the correct decisions that they're making. So we take exception to that. We joined in with Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, back in 2018 to stop that attack on the independent judiciary. And we've joined efforts now with Common Cause, Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, and more than 125 other organizations who are standing up and trying to stop the power grab against the Pennsylvania appellate courts. And we are just going to be the collateral damage in all of this. They're mad at the courts and they're going to take it out on us and try to disenfranchise us and change the way in which we currently are able to elect our appellate court judges.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now we're going to jump to Khalif. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing with Common Cause? I know you've been involved in some legal action, I believe, and made some statements recently over the last month publicly around that. Can you talk a little bit about that testimony and specifically what Common Cause is doing around this issue?
Sure. So Common Cause is a national organization with staff in probably over 20 states, and one of the main concern for us is about being vigilant around democracy. So, and for us, what that means is sort of safeguarding the process that's associated with people being able to voice their concerns, voice their approval or disapproval, or whatever have you, but being able to participate fairly and justly in the democracy. And so, we often speak out against issues that we believe compromise the integrity of our democracy. And Katina pretty much said exactly where we are with the Judicial Independence Project of Pennsylvania. We are partnered with a number of statewide organizations who are focused on preventing the bill as HB 38, which is about drawing judicial districts. So we're focused on completely eliminating that bill and preventing it from making it to the ballot. Because the last thing, and I think the most important point, is that we believe that the judicial branch is probably our last saving grace with regard to democracy in this country. And if we allow that to be compromised, we really don't have any hope in terms of this being a true democracy.
Thank you for that. And now we're going to go to Marie before we open it up. Questions from Ryan and Miracle. Marie, could you, besides what Khadija and Khalif laid out so far, what are some of the other arguments that you're hearing against judicial gerrymandering, and in the reporting that you're doing, what are some of the arguments that you're hearing for?
Sure. I'll start with the latter question first. So the sponsor of the bill is Russ Diamond, a representative from Lebanon County, and he's arguing that judges come with a certain judicial philosophy. And right now on the courts, the majority of the appellate court judges are from either Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, so the two kind of urban centers and the most democratic areas of the state, obviously. And he's arguing that the courts need to have more geographic diversity, because someone from Lebanon County or Center County might have a different judicial philosophy than someone from Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. And so he's pushing for kind of geographic diversity to get that kind of across the board. And the way to do that is to have these judicial districts that are drawn every 10 years by the legislature. And so that 10-year cycle correlates to the decennial census, where we collect, population data every 10 years. So similar to our congressional districts and our legislative districts, those judicial districts would be drawn every 10 years. And so some of the critics of the bill say that, number one, those judges would be they would be responsible for or represent their constituents in those districts. They would be beholden to those constituents when, judges really aren't supposed to be beholden to anyone, right?
Right.
A judge is supposed to, interpret the law regardless of whether they're from Philadelphia or Center County, for example. And then the other thing is that they would, the critics say that the judges would be beholden to the legislature as well, who has the power to redraw the districts in whichever way they want. So if a judge makes a ruling that the legislature isn't a fan of or is displeased with, they can just draw that judge out of that district when it comes time, in the years that end in one for the census to come and for those lines to be redrawn.
Wow. Miracle, do you have a question for the panel?
Yes, my first question is going to be how, for somebody who's watching this, who's never heard of judicial gerrymandering before, how does this directly impact people with having all these new judges? We're talking about diversity based on regions. What is that going to look like for creating precedents and having a standard legal code for the people to know what's going on when they go to file or go to submit appeals?
I can jump in here if you like. Yeah,
please do.
Yeah, so that's a large question there, Miracle. So a few things. How does this impact the people, right? So, I want to correct Russ Diamond's assertions also in this answer, which is that our appellate courts are not packed with Pittsburghers or folks from Philadelphia. That is the Supreme Court at the moment. That's their main concern, is with the Supreme Court and not the Commonwealth Court and not the Superior Court. Actually, 22% of the entire population of Pennsylvania lives in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Yet of all of the appellate courts, 30% of the appellate court judges of those three courts actually live in Pittsburgh area or Philadelphia area. So they choose the numbers that they like to share when they throw those numbers out there. What I want to say is that, as Marie mentioned, there's no Elk County, Montgomery County, Lebanon County way to decipher the Pennsylvania Constitution. And again, these judges are not beholden to constituencies. They're beholden to the Constitution and the law. So where this plays in our communities is we think about the types of cases that are heard by the Commonwealth Court, the types of cases that are heard by the Superior Court. I'll take, for instance, a young woman in Delaware County, right outside of Philadelphia, who had to vote with a provisional ballot in this last election because she didn't get her ballot in time. And so it was the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania who ruled that her provisional ballot should be counted. And so her voice was heard in this past election. These are the types of cases that are being heard by these courts that are upsetting some folks who currently sit in Harrisburg. Other cases you'll hear about, there was a woman in Philadelphia who is a victim herself of crime, lost her brother and her son to crime. She also went through the criminal justice system herself in Philadelphia. And she got to vote, as like many of us did 2 years ago, on Marcy's Law, the crime victims bill that was on the ballot 2 years ago. And that was just overruled by the Commonwealth Court. They ruled that there were just way too many things going on within that ballot question, and they overturned it and took away our votes on that. It'll probably get appealed to the Supreme Court. But it's kind of examples of the cases that are heard. We're talking about appellate courts, right? Most cases stop at the common pleas level. We have a better shot maybe of winning that Powerball than having your case heard at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. But I know that if I am someone who's about to get sent to Forest County and be incarcerated for a long amount of time, and I want to have the opportunity to appeal my case, I want to be able to appeal my case and a judge hear my case that is not from out of the center of the state. I want, just because they live in the center of the state. So I think there is no rhyme or reason to Russ Diamond and how the districts will be split up. We don't know how they would do that. We know how they had an opportunity to do that in 2011 and what they did. So we don't think that we should allow the legislators to draw lines and determine, how people are going to get dispersed justice. We already have something called prison gerrymandering, and that's a whole nother topic.
Right.
And if I could just kind of elaborate on Khadijah's point, is that these are statewide issues that these judges are ruling on, right? And so the argument that critics who are against this bill also make is that, why should we vote? Why should we have a limit in who we can vote for when these judges are doing these rulings statewide, but I only get to vote for, 3 people on the entire appellate court system instead of the 31 who make decisions that are going to impact me statewide, whether they come from Elk County or Philadelphia.
So I'll say this though. The title of the show tonight is Judicial Gerrymandering. So this is the outcome of what will happen if HB 38 is passed, right? So we'll have a legislature that has gerrymandered the state and was trying and had gerrymandered the congressional districts,
right, drawing
the lines for judges now. So we can assume that those districts will be gerrymandered as well. So let's look at it. Let's look at the long game now. Khadijah's absolutely right. There's not going to be a lot of cases that float up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but the ones that do are critical, right? Those are going to be the critical ones that we look at for this state. And then if let's say it's gerrymandered and we don't get the decisions we want and we try to take it to the U.S. Supreme Court, we know the composition of the U.S. Supreme Court, right? We know that the judges are all about state sovereignty and they're going to kick the decision back down to the states. And what do we have then, right? If you have a gerrymandered appellate court and the decisions all go conservative and we try to kick it up to the U.S. Supreme Court, it's going to get kicked right back down. And we're stuck. So it's critical because the critical nature of the decision to actually make it up there. You know, we're talking about back to the districts, congressional districts, state districts. You know, a lot of other issues that are critical for us. We're not going to get those, and we're not going to find relief at the U.S. Supreme at the federal level. So that's the long game that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, question for the panel?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Kahari. Yeah, so for the drawing of districts, you know, for congressional districts and everything like that, there's like certain criteria that they have to adhere to in the drawing of those districts. Obviously, not that effective actually in preventing gerrymandering. But you know, say this were to pass, and we do, and we are in a system of judicial districting. What sort of criteria would there be in place to determine how those districts were drawn? Would it be modeled after you know, the way that congressional districts are drawn now, or would it be more or less restrictive in terms of that criteria that's there to, you know, try to prevent gerrymandering in theory at least?
I can jump in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Jump in, Khadija.
All right, so, you know, there's all types of things they have to take into account when it comes to drawing lines, right? Contiguous lines, you know, keeping in with, you know, similar communities, et cetera, and also keeping in mind the Voting Rights Act, right, and the VRA. But what you'll see here with these judicial districts are that they're split up by the amount of judges who sit on the bench. So there's 15 judges who sit on the Superior Court. They would break it up into 15 different districts for the Superior Court. They would break it up into 7 districts for the Supreme Court. And again, we're giving this power to the legislature, who are proven to not be able to do this effectively without gerrymandering in their favor. So, you know, this is just, you know, this is just letting somebody take the power away from the judicial branch in order to serve their interests. And this is not going to help with any type of diversity on the bench. It won't help with gender diversity on the bench, which we happen to do a good job with that here in Pennsylvania on the appellate courts. It won't help with racial diversity on the bench. They can draw out areas as they do. You know, if you have one court, if you're doing 7 districts for the Supreme, you have 1 court in Philly and 1 in Pittsburgh, and then you have 5 in the center of the state. Potentially, that's how that could look. And so that will do nothing to help racial diversity on the bench, which is lacking here in Pennsylvania. 1 of 30 of the current sitting judges are a person of color. And so that's problematic. And then if you think about what's happening in the T of the state, you know, the top and then the down the center there, a lot of the common pleas judges, and this is where we get our appellate court judges from, the common pleas, not a lot of women sitting in those common pleas counties. For instance, Lebanon County, Russ Diamond's county, not 1 woman sits on the common pleas court. How are you going to get a woman out of Lebanon County or Lancaster County, another county with 0 women on the common pleas court? How are you going to get a woman up to the appellate courts from that area when you don't have any on the common pleas court? And studies have been done, and we can, you know, there's evidence that says other states who draw their maps the way that Russ Diamond wants us to, like Illinois, have not had success in bringing on any racial diversity to the bench through the methods in which they are electing judges.
Wow. And one thing that came to mind, actually, Marie, when you were you know, explaining, and Khadija, your comments get at this point too. It definitely seems like there's definitely an argument against, you know, Russ Diamond and these other folks' assertions, you know, around disenfranchisement, right? You know, if I can only choose 3 of the 30 plus judges that sit on the appellate courts, you know, aren't I being disenfranchised, you know, out of like 28 votes, you know, when it comes to that? So has there been people making that disenfranchisement argument? And if you could just elaborate more.
Yeah, there have, and maybe Khadija could speak more to that. You know, when that argument gets brought up, Russ Diamond likes to bring up the fact that a lot of the people who are against this bill seem to support appointing judges instead of electing them. So there's, you know, this has been kind of a big debate among states for years and years and years. And this proposal, judicial districting, goes back at least as far back as 1989 in Pennsylvania, some version of this. But the other way to get our judges is to appoint them either through an independent commission or a commission of some sort, or through a gubernatorial appointment, or even the legislature appointing them, or confirming them at the very least. And so those who support this kind of pivot the argument about disenfranchisement to say, well, if you support appointing judges, then you completely disenfranchise the voters, because, that voter could choose to vote for the governor who's going to appoint that judge, but you're not allowing the voters to vote for those judges anymore. You're kind of narrowing it down to just that one representative who's going to then appoint the judge for you.
Yeah, I just want to say, Pennsylvania is one of 8 states in the entire country who vote for our judges. Most states do not vote for judges. And currently, while we do not have merit selection here in the state, while we are currently voting for our judges, if I can vote for all 31, I want to vote for all 31. I don't want to vote for the 3 that Representative Russ Diamond out of Lebanon County tells me I'm allowed to vote for. I don't want to vote for just 1 on the Commonwealth. I don't want to vote for just 1 on the Supreme or 1 on Superior. I want to vote for all 31. Because if it's my day in court and I'm sitting before a panel, I'm not going to sit before just the 1 that I elected or didn't elect. I'm going to sit in front of 3 or more, and I want to have the opportunity to vote for all of them.
And let me just say that, and Khadijah's right. I mean, I feel the same way. But so there's a slew of arguments from every single and possible angle against this legislation, and the fact of the matter is there are no entities, no organizations, not the DA's Association, but no organization that has come out in support of this legislation, which is unusual, but which makes sense, because it doesn't make sense at all. There's so many arguments against it, and from so many different angles, that is almost ridiculous at this point. And we're still waiting for someone other than Russ Diamond and the rest of the Republicans to come out and actually support this bill. There's no one here. There's no one out there that's willing to support this bill.
Interesting. America, do you have another question?
Yes, and I know we do have some slides to show folks, but I was wondering, is there any type of argument that if we're going to start carving up the judicial section by region, then the next step is to only have certain judges only hear, kind of how the federal districts are, to only hear cases within their regions as well? Or is it just we're going to do the judicial gerrymandering and we'll leave it up to chance? Because there's also a racial element when we talk about where particularly a lot of the Black and brown folks live in the Commonwealth. And so if we're going to increase the chances that people who are making decisions not only don't look like people coming in front of them, but now under this judicial diversity model have nothing in common with the people that they're seeing as well. So I was wondering, has that discussion been going on as well?
I'll say this. We don't know too much about what the legislative accompaniment is to this House Bill 38. We don't know very much about how this is really going to go down. Even if you look into the bill, you pull up the bill, you go and read through. We don't really know how they're going to determine who hears what cases, where the judges, what's going to happen to the current judges who sit on the bench. Will they need to move? If they currently live in Harrisburg, because there's 3 appellate court judges who live in Harrisburg, will they need to move out of Harrisburg and move to Bradford County in order to stay on? How will they continue to be put back on the bench after 10 years? Will there be that opportunity? Will there be courthouses that need to be built in Johnstown to go along with this? So I think that there's just so much unknown because the accompanying legislation is just not complete. So you're asking questions that kind of we would like to know the answers to as well. I don't know if Marie has been able to dig into that a little further.
No, so we know that, Louisiana is one of 2 states that has a similar model. Louisiana and Illinois have regional judicial districts, at least for Supreme Court. The difference between them and Pennsylvania's proposal is that their lines have not been redrawn in a long time. Illinois since 1963, when this when it was law, and then Louisiana since at least 2000. Now, there is a lawsuit, the NAACP sued in Louisiana to force the legislature to redraw their judicial districts because there was the Supreme Court is lacking a minority representation, and so they're arguing that another majority minority district needs to be redrawn. So we do see that there is litigation happening, and that may very well be the case if this passes through as well. And I do want to just point out in the bill, you're right, Khadija, does say, the legislature will establish by law the districts. So that's pretty much all we know. We don't know how those districts would be drawn. I posed the question to Russ Diamond. I asked him, if you had a magic wand and could draw the map yourself, what would it look like? And he said, I'm not a professional map drawer, so I can't answer that question. But he did tell me that because it would be established by law, it would be similar to the congressional redistricting. It would be a bill, just like any other bill in the legislature, that is subject to the governor's veto. So he said, there would be that check with the governor. And he also said that the Supreme Court would be involved. And that is written in the bill, that the districts would be drawn with input from the Supreme Court. So it's a lot of clarity that is missing in exactly how this would happen.
And actually, that raises a huge point, because, the points that Khadija, you've been hitting on, all evening, as well as Khalif, you hit on, as far as the history, with the congressional districts that were, written last decade. And then one then says, well, we just came through a period of time when the Supreme Court, had to intervene in the drawing of districts. Now, what happens when we get, into this kind of circular metaphysical moment when the Supreme Court then has to rule on districts that involve themselves? What talk has there been about that? Has there been any thinking of what happens constitutionally, when a body, basically is deciding their own fate in some ways?
If you read the bill, it's one of the most poorly written bills that you probably will ever come across. It doesn't take into account so many factors, many of which Marie and Khadija mentioned. Some of the simplest ones too, like simply, what are we going to do about who's seated now? Just the simple matters that need to be addressed haven't even been addressed. It's clearly, it's one of the most emotional bills that I've ever seen in my life. I'll tell you that much, in terms of it's a reprisal bill against the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. It's extremely emotional, angry about the outcome of the election, angry about the decisions that were made after and during the election. And it just reads that way if you read the bill. It's just not a good bill at all.
Right. Well, and I know we have some slides before we get to that. I just want to talk just briefly about what's next. I know there's a date coming up very soon when it's going to be decided whether or not, so can we talk a little bit about the sausage making part of this, which I'm sure is going to make all the viewers excited, about where we're at from, today's the 8th to, I believe, the 19th is the deadline that we're looking at.
So I love to talk about the sausage. So let's talk about how the sausage is made. I don't know how that came across. All right, here we go. So obviously, we're trying to fight this so it doesn't get on a ballot here in the state of Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvanians since 1996 have said yes every time something appeared on a ballot. Since 1996, 17 times we have said yes on ballot referendum questions. So we don't want it to get to the ballot and have to fight that. So right now where we are is, shout out to all of the activists out there and advocates watching this, because their letters to the editor, their op-eds, their phone calls into legislative offices, their emails into legislative offices, their visits to legislative offices, if they feel comfortable, is what is allowing us to not claim victory yet on this, but know that it's going to be a hard way to go for them to get this on the May ballot. Nothing in Harrisburg is normal, just like nothing in DC is normal. So yeah, session days are running out on them. The calendar is running out on them. But session days can be added and calendars can change. So I'm not going to feel good. I'm sure Khalif won't feel good about any of this until the drop dead date of the 18th on this one, February 18th. but then we got to go up against that end of July date for them to get it on the November ballot. So we may be winning this particular battle, but we have not won the entire war yet, because they could put this on the November ballot if they can get this through by the end of July.
And just to back up a little bit and get a little bit more technical, so the deadline that Khadija is talking about, the 18th of February, per the Constitution, the Department of State has to publish the results of the vote on this bill 3 months ahead of the election in which they want to get the question on the ballot. So that would be the May 18th election, pushes us back to February 18th. You're likely to see a lot of constitutional amendments one way or another, either on the May ballot or the November ballot. So the way that we get a constitutional amendment on the ballot is to pass it in consecutive legislative sessions, and then it goes to a vote. So it's a pretty big deal to change the Constitution. So there's that February 18th date, and the legislators aren't supposed to be back in session until March. Like Khadija said, they could add days or just add days. Now this passed a House committee. It passed with I think it was 13-12. You had 2 Republicans voting with all the Democrats to have this fail, and it actually passed narrowly. But it's it's been sitting since that committee meeting, which is sometime in January. So it still needs that 3 consecutive days in the House, and then it also still needs to go to the Senate. So it's not looking likely that it will be on the May ballot, simply because there are no more legislative days scheduled in February before February 18th. Now, as Khadija said, they could push it to the November ballot. I don't want to speculate as to why this hasn't gotten votes on the House yet. It hasn't been brought up. The leaders in the Republican majority decide when bills are put up for a vote. So I don't know if Khadija or Khalif, you have heard any rumors about why exactly this hasn't gotten a vote yet?
That is 12-13 is a good reason. The votes may not be there. Everything is chessed. And when they realized that this was was a very, very close vote and may not make it over the top, they had to pull back and I guess have some additional conversations to ensure that they could actually get this thing passed. But we're going to be having conversations too, so we might be saying the same thing in November, hopefully, right, Khadija and Marie, because we're going to have those same conversations as well.
I did have a question. So this past election, we've heard a lot about the demographics changing throughout the Commonwealth. People are kind of moving more into middle Pennsylvania. And so it seems that one of the arguments is going to be that there is a perception that you do judicial gerrymandering, and it's going to be more traditional folks being on the ballot. But in the realities, that may not be the case because of how many people are moving into Pennsylvania and kind of leaving the cities. And I'm wondering how that has been factored into making sure that when we do, I know we said the bill isn't really there, but how that all has been factored into the way that this diversity of judicial thought is being described and being promoted in conservative circles.
That's a good question. That's a good question. So I'll say this. Everybody wants to be, I think everyone appreciates the fact that they're able to vote for or have a weigh in on all the judges of the appellate, that's not a partisan piece. I think that goes both ways, and when you're thinking about a message and you're crafting a message, I think everybody is open to change as long as they don't lose anything as a result of that change, and in our minds, talking to people about the fact that, your voice may not be heard, or it only be heard in this very narrow circumstances of judges within your district. I think that's a compelling that's a compelling argument. That's a compelling conversation to have. And you know, there's still some people out there who actually believe in democracy and what it means. So you know, if we can't get down to the specifics, we can talk about democracy and the integrity of democracy and how it's being challenged daily, and especially in particular with this bill.
And you know, folks are concerned about having that regional flavor. You know, I want to feel as though my judge understands me. We came from the same neighborhood. Maybe I had a beer with him at the local bar, you know, 15 years ago. You get that on the lower courts. You know, you get that on your common pleas because you're electing those judges by county, or your municipal courts where you're electing them by really your neighborhood, right? So if you want to have that local flavor and you want to feel as though your judge gets you, you get that at the common pleas level. Again, the appellate courts are the final arbiters of the decisions that are made, and they're going based upon the Pennsylvania Constitution and the law, not any kind of issues that are regional related. You know, if I'm someone who lives in Chester County, you know, I grew up in Chester County, I may have an issue with the pipelines, right? But then do I need to have a judge who lives in Chester County to understand the pipeline situation? And the other thing too is this also puts money into these races, where, you know, you're inserting a lot of money. Illinois just had the most expensive election for a judicial race in history, $10.7 million for an anti-retention campaign. 4.5 million of that 10.7 came from one man, a hedge fund owner, who inserted himself into this election. So I think that if you're trying to speak to the middle of the state, the T of the state, about why this is problematic for them, I think it's problematic for them because you think about what I said earlier about getting the women on the bench. There's a lot of women in the center of the state. I think they would like to see themselves on the bench. That will be a problem for the center of the state. And again, as Cleve said, no matter where we live in Pennsylvania, there's still a lot of us who believe in democracy, and we know the difference between lower courts and the appellate courts and the functions that they have.
Yeah, thank you for that, Khadija. And then before we get to the graphics, I just had a quick, really two questions, I guess. But so for House Bill 38 this time around, it was really abruptly rushed to a vote in the committee without, you know, any sort of like public hearing or testimony or anything like that. If they do end up having to, you know, wait to try to get this on the ballot in November rather than getting it there by May, do you think, you know, the Republican legislature will allow any sort of public hearing or testimony, or, you know, will they try to block that for the reasons we've discussed, that there's not really any, you know, legal group or anyone in that field that supports it? And then two, you know, if there is any sort of hearing or testimony allowed, you know, given that 13-12 vote, and, you know, it seems like maybe there's still some people on the fence since they haven't tried to rush it to a vote now, do you think that, you know, any of that testimony would be able to potentially sway anyone at this point, or do you think minds are more or less made up by now?
So let me say this. Democracy works best when people are active and engaged, right? It works best. We don't get a well-functioning democracy when people withdraw, you know, we don't vote, we don't participate in these conversations, we don't go to public hearings or things like that. Publicly elected officials count on our ignorance in these situations in order to move legislation. We have to be able to be aware of what it means to have these judicial districts, the difference between courts, the importance of the independence of the judicial branch. You know, these are things that we really need to know, and these are the conversations we need to have in our communities, beyond this particular issue, because it doesn't begin or stop with HB 38. You know, these are conversations, the overarching conversation is around democracy, right? And these are conversations we have to have on our own, in our own neighborhoods, in order for us to be much more effective and to have a stronger democracy. You know, we can't depend on the Russ Diamonds of the world to have these public hearings in which, you know, you might find out about it, you know, at the last minute. If you're watching the site, if you're on the legislative site, you know, we have to get to a point where we're comfortable having overarching conversations around democracy in our own neighborhoods, like we used to. You know, Kahari, the whole barbershop phenomenon. You know what I'm saying? Right. we got to get back to those moments where we can have these conversations. So, in answer to your question, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, he might, but if we're not engaged, if we're not participating, if I don't understand how this connects to my day to day, then I'm not going to the hearing anyway. I'm not going to pay attention to it anyway. So part of my responsibility is helping people understand how it connects. And their responsibility is, once they see it connects, to get there, get to the public hearing, have the conversations that need to be had, you know? So that's where I am with it.
And I actually asked Russ Diamond about this a few weeks ago, you know, will the public have a chance to weigh in on this? And he said that they are fielding and receiving public feedback, and that, you know, ultimately the Constitution can be amended by a vote of the people at the ballot box. So in other words, you know, you will have your voice heard at the ballot box, but that is the only time, it sounds like. I mean, I don't think he's ruled out, you know, a public hearing, but we are fielding and receiving public feedback is the extent of, will the public be able to weigh in?
And I'll say, thankfully, I think that maybe what has pushed this thing out of possibility for May's ballot is that the public has been reaching out. And the fact that Russ Diamond is the only one who's speaking in favor of this, and he doesn't know justice on his own. You know, there's more than 125 organizations, just part of, you know, the JIPA table, the Judicial Independence Project of Pennsylvania, and we represent Pennsylvania. And we're calling ourselves a table and not a coalition, because we don't agree on every issue, but on this issue we agree. And we're folks who, some of us who are in favor of merit selection, some of us not. Some of us in favor of some environmental changes, some of us not. Some of us in favor of a woman's right to choose, maybe some of us not. But yet we all agree that House Bill 38 is problematic, and we've all joined together at this table to fight back. And that's what Russ Diamond doesn't have. He doesn't have that public opinion that we have. We're out here, hundreds of letters to the editor have been written about this issue. A groundswell of opinion is 3 or 4 people reaching out to a legislator and talking about something. And we're having hundreds of calls into offices being made. And so they're hearing the opposition, and not sure that they're hearing those who are in support. And if there is someone in support, they should come public, because they're not saying anything out loud.
Mm.
And so we had a couple of questions in the chat about how like who elects judges, how many judges are elected. And I know you have some slideshow information just to censor us and ground us as we go out. So if you can pull up the slides for the people and just explain what they're seeing on these 4 slides, so that they'll be able to have the information to make the best decisions for themselves.
Yeah, so, you know, it's been some time since we had civics, right? 9th, 10th grade, and that's further away from some of us and others. So this is just a look at the hierarchy of the courts here in Pennsylvania. So you have your minor courts. It could be your traffic courts. It could be your magisterial courts. They might hear something about parking or speeding. And they can still dispense justice and give up to like a 5-year sentence. So they're not all that minor. And then you have the courts of common pleas, and that's your trial courts. And that's where most cases are going to be heard and stopped. They're not going to get to the next level, which is your intermediate appellate courts, your Commonwealth Court, which is uniquely Pennsylvania, and the Superior Court. And then the final arbiter here in the state of Pennsylvania is our Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And then what you'll see on the next slide here is kind of who sits currently on the Superior Court. So there's supposed to be 15 judges on the court. There's currently 1 vacancy. That's why I mentioned the 30 number instead of 31 earlier. But these judges, as we know, we elect them in statewide elections currently. They serve 10-year terms. It's a partisan election. But then we have the opportunity to retain them or not, and then they can serve another 10 years. There's currently 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans, evenly split on the Superior Court right now. You'll see that also, if you look very closely, and it's probably hard if you're watching this on your phone, but there's only 1 person of color in this picture, and that's Superior Court Judge Carolyn Nichols, and she is the only person of color on all of the appellate courts. The next one you'll see here is the Commonwealth Court, and like I said, this is uniquely Pennsylvania. They hear cases about the state government and government agencies. Again, 10-year terms, partisan elections. There are 7 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and this is the other of the 2 intermediate appellate courts. And then you see a good amount of women. If you look at these pictures, you see a good amount of women, more women on the Commonwealth Court than men. So again, we do a great job statewide when we elect judges statewide on the appellate courts of putting women on the bench. And then the final one here is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And if you take a good look at these folks, you'll see again, almost an even split of men and women. It's getting closer there. There are 5 Democrats who currently sit on the Supreme Court and 2 Republicans. It's a partisan election again. We vote for these justices in 10-year terms, and then a nonpartisan retention vote after they've served 10 years. And then you get to go to the ballot box, in November, and you can say yes or no to retain them. And Pennsylvania, fun fact, the oldest appellate court in the United States, 1722. It's the final stop, and most cases are going to stop there. And that gentleman in the center, he'll be retiring very soon. The next Chief Justice will make Pennsylvania history. She'll be Chief Justice Deborah Todd, and she's to his right there in that picture, and she'll be the first woman here in Pennsylvania history to have the Chief Justice title, and that's all due to seniority on the bench. So, you can take that down if you'd like. I just wanted you all to see currently who's sitting on our benches here in the States. You get an idea of who these folks are, and just know that they come from all over the state, if they were even born in the state, or if they were even born in the United States. And I think that we kind of take our values with us. So, I was born outside of Pittsburgh in Monroeville. I grew up outside of Philly in Westchester. I currently live in Harrisburg, and I take all of that flavor with me wherever I go. And it's just a reminder to the folks out there that our appellate court justices are the final arbiters. They are not beholden to us, only beholden to our Constitution and the law. We get that local flavor at our lower court level.
And one question, because everyone knows that, out of the 3 hosts, I've worked on a ton of campaigns, here in Pennsylvania, and one I was very much involved in was the 2015 campaign, which actually I believe Justices Donahue, Wecht, and Dougherty got elected, as well as I believe Justice Wojcik at the Commonwealth Court level, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it was 5 seats up that year, and I think it was a clean sweep for the Democrats. Has there been any talk about specifically that race? Because that race specifically really transformed the court. And I feel like this year could be a very similar year as well, because in the midst of this conversation that we're having, each of those courts has a seat open, beyond the retention votes, has an open seat, on the court. So, behind the scenes, how much did the 2015 election, bear into, Russ Diamond's motivations, whether he says it or not? What are you hearing about how the 2015 election has impacted the way folks are looking at this moving forward? So I see, I'm looking at like memes right now, like everybody's. It's like we just created a meme just now.
So I don't know. I'm not sure about the election. I'm sure that played into a bit, but with regard to the presidential election, man, the outcome of the election, the outcome of lawsuits challenging the validity of the election, lawsuits barring the certification of the election, all of those things, and the decisions that were handed down, not just by the Supreme Court, by the Superior Court as well. I mean, and the Commonwealth, it just didn't sit well with old Russ, and again, if you look at the bill, it kind of tells you that there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. This was purely about this was a punitive measure against the appellate courts, based on the decisions that were made as a result during and after the election. And it's clear. It's as clear as day. I think, and ultimately, I believe because of the punitive nature of the bill, it's not going to. I don't believe it's going to succeed. That doesn't mean we stop working, as Khadija will always say. We don't stop working until the job is done, but we think we got enough steam to make this happen. Okay.
And maybe I'll say what Khalif would not say. And that is that last election that put all those judges on the bench was very eye-opening for a lot of folks. And there were some folks who put a lot of thought into throwing a lot of money into that election to get the outcome that they wanted, because they know that redistricting was coming up. They know the importance of the courts. And so, yeah, that weighed very heavily, I'm quite sure, on Russ Diamond and Chris Dush and others, you know, even when they were trying to impeach the justices back in 2018. So, yeah, I'm sure that was a thought in their mind, but unfortunately for the Republicans, they had Russ Diamond as the sponsor of this bill, who did not, as Khalif say, use a lot of emotion and not a lot of thought into writing this bill out.
Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Kahari. Yeah, so in addition to House Bill 38 and the districting of judicial elections, one thing that was mentioned earlier is that a lot of states handle that via appointment, and I believe that there is also a bill in the House, either in the House Judiciary Committee or had been passed by committee at some point, you know, related to changing the that process to one of an appointment process rather than an election process. So yeah, just any information on where that bill is right now, you know, any potential likelihood of that ever getting on a ballot or coming to a vote or anything along those lines.
I'm looking for the bill now because I can't remember where it is and who sponsored it. So if Khadija or Khalif, you want to weigh in?
I don't want to speak. I want to say it's Saylor, who just came out recently making a statement that, you know, they're in favor of merit selection. Merit selection actually had bipartisan support. So, you know, I heard one legislator say that if House Bill 38, you know, passes and then we get to vote on this, they're still going to bring up the merit selection eventually because that's where they like to see. You know, there's organizations like Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts very much in favor of merit selection. Organizations such as the ACLU, not so much. So, you know, there's definitely pluses and minuses to both ways to elect judges, but I'm pretty sure that one had some bipartisan support and it had some movement along the way. But the House 38 kind of took all the air out of those sails, I think, at the moment.
Interesting. And go ahead, Marie.
So, yeah, Paul Schemmel is a Republican out of Franklin County. He's got the bill. So, yeah, I mean, it does seem like, you know, a Republican is carrying this bill. It doesn't seem like it's gone anywhere. It's still in the House Judiciary Committee at this point.
And I did want to just switch gears to another issue that is related around some reporting that you done, Marie. And if you could talk a little bit about the outgoing Pennsylvania Secretary of State. You recently wrote a piece about that because that's actually directly tied to constitutional amendments and certain kind of administrative functions that they have that impacted a particular amendment that was going to go on the ballot, and they stepped down. And you wrote a little bit about how that could impact, you know, future kind of election work and engaging voters in the state of Pennsylvania, and what that means for voters across the Pennsylvania, with Kathy Boockvar leaving her post as state Secretary of State.
Yeah, so I'm just pulling up the story that my colleague initially wrote the story about Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar resigning over a pretty big mistake that the department made. So like I said earlier, if you have a constitutional amendment, the Department of State has to publish that announcement of the legislature's votes 3 months ahead of time in, I believe it's 2 newspapers in every county. And for one constitutional amendment that was supposed to be on the ballot this May, it had to do with giving victims of child sexual abuse kind of this 2-year window to, I guess, sue, and Khadija or Khalif, correct me if I'm wrong, but to be able to sue kind of their accusers, giving them that 2-year window that they otherwise wouldn't have had. So that amendment was supposed to be on the ballot this May after passing in 2 consecutive legislative sessions. And it turns out that the Department of State did not, as constitutionally required, publish that amendment. And so she took responsibility for that and resigned. I believe Friday was her last day, and the governor has appointed an acting secretary. And so, you know, this was unrelated to any of the election drama that happened in 2020, right? The secretary was and still is accused of Republicans of kind of manipulating the system, of overstepping her authority in issuing guidance to counties in how they should deal with mail ballots, which of course was new this year, giving everyone the right to vote by mail, regardless of whether you had an excuse or not. You didn't need a reason. So that was new, and there was some instances in which the counties needed clarity on, what to do. They had a lot of questions, and so the Secretary of State issued guidance. And so, her resignation over this constitutional amendment requirement was unrelated to the election. And yet, we can already see that Republicans are kind of using that as fuel for, they say we've known that she was incompetent from the start. And this, just further proves that, the department needs some looking into. And the House Republicans have been doing a series of election hearings. We have one again on Thursday, just examining, the election and examining the Department of State's role in the election. So it was a big week last week.
Wow, that's a lot. And we have been dropping some of your incredible journalism in the comment section. So we're going to be sharing that with our viewers as well. And going back even to some of the stuff that you did right after the election, covering the Dominion voting machines and all the excellent work that you did around all the drama that we are all, much too familiar with since the November election. But now I'm going to pass the baton to my trusty colleague, Miracle Jones.
Yes, and taking one of the questions from the chat, it was Faith who asked, what are some of the key points that we can use to educate others about this bill and the response? And in your response, can you also include how people can get in contact with your organizations and get involved if you are still taking on volunteers for this issue?
Go ahead, Khadija.
All right, the top lines, right? So if you have someone stuck in an elevator with you and you got 20 seconds to break down judicial gerrymandering, one, it's disenfranchising us at the moment. We currently can vote for 31 judges. We want to vote for 31, not 3, that are drawn by the legislature. It's a power grab by the legislative branch to usurp their authority over the judicial branch. We have 3 independent co-equal branches of government. The other thing is there is no Pennsylvania, and there's no Pittsburgh, no Philadelphia way to determine the Pennsylvania Constitution. We've been voting for these judges statewide. We should continue to do so. It's not going to do anything to bring any kind of racial or gender diversity to the bench. That's just not going to happen. So that would be my quick 15 seconds if I'm stuck with someone in an elevator to tell them why to vote against House Bill 38. And then the advocacy things people can do. I encourage you to go to our website, www.judicialindependencepa.org. We have the call to action there if you like to write a letter to the editor, if you want to reach out to your local legislator and let them know how you feel about House Bill 38. There's a script there. If you feel uncomfortable in what you may say when you call, there's a script included within that call to action to kind of give you some pointers on what you can say. It'll help you with your 15-second pitch. And just, keep up the fight. I think, our legislators need to hear from us. Maybe we contact them when there's a pothole, there's a light out. But we need to contact our legislators when there's issues such as this, that they're trying to move through the halls of Harrisburg without us paying attention, trying to catch us sleeping and not paying attention, especially when they're moving these through without public hearings. So just keep staying involved and learning about the issues. The website, is there for you to see, judicialindependencepa.org. And learn more about the different organizations that are involved in this. And you see yourself in this fight because they're, represented by like 1 million people. These 125 organizations represent 1 million Pennsylvanians here fighting back against House Bill 38.
I also say that there is a clear attack on all of our ability to express ourselves in this democracy. And so I'll say to you that everything that Khadija said is real, and please don't think that your one phone call doesn't matter, your one letter doesn't matter, it matters. Your voice matters. Whatever you can do, whatever you can offer, it matters, and it adds up. So if all of us think that way. Like, all of us have an opportunity to express ourselves. All of us have an opportunity to contribute in some meaningful way. You don't have to be a member of any of these organizations. You can just go to the website, and this everything is laid out for you in terms of, like Khadijah said, scripts, letters, everything you need is there. So please just go and look, check it out, and read for yourself, and share it with someone. That's the only other thing I'll say, is that these are great conversations that we have in these webinars, but if they don't go outside of this forum to people that you know and people that you talk to on a regular basis, then we haven't done our job. We haven't done a good job. So please take this conversation outside of this.
Awesome. So Ron's going to have one question. Miracle's going to close us out after that, but I do want to give a shout out to Bayard Rustin, hanging out over at Khadijah's left shoulder. I wanted to do that before we left tonight. As soon as we came out, like, okay, I see, representing, so for those who don't know, Bayard Rustin is one of the greatest, organizers to ever live. A leader in the LGBT community, faced a lot of challenges in his civil rights work because he was a member of the LGBT community, and just one of the great, courageous people that has ever walked the earth, and was really the strategist behind so much of the work that when we think about A. Philip Randolph and Martin Luther King and the March on Washington and all that stuff, much of, like, many organizing efforts, it's like folks behind folks kind of behind the scenes making that happen. I believe he's from Westchester, right?
This is one of the reasons why I traveled with this man. Pre-COVID, he used to go with me wherever I went. I would take him with me, and he is from Westchester, Pennsylvania, my hometown. And just a reminder to folks out there that in 1963, he was one of the organizers for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and he did that thing without the internet. He did that without Facebook or Instagram or emails, and he got 250,000 people to show up on the mall there in Washington to advocate for what we need. So we need some more of this Bayard Rustin in the moment.
Absolutely. Now I wanted to give that shout out. So Ryan, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kahari. I actually don't really have anything else. I think everything I wanted to ask about has been pretty thoroughly covered. So I just want to say thank y'all for being so thorough. For providing all that information, for people who, clearly even, people even who are pretty knowledgeable about the topic, just still a lot of information covered. So, all across the spectrum, any level of familiarity with the topic, I think we got through a lot tonight. So thank you all for your time and, for all the great work you do protecting the independent judiciary. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, Miracle.
All right. Am I doing my wrap up? my traditional wrap up?
Yeah. Well, you usually kind of ask your positive question.
Yes. Okay.
And the energy, we talk all this deep stuff, and then she comes with the
yes. So we like to end on a positive note. We want to ask each of our panelists, outside, of the Super Bowl, unless the Super Bowl was the one thing, what has brought you joy in recent days? It's still a global pandemic, but, a lot of stuff is happening. So what is something that has brought you joy in the past week or so?
I'll go because I'm very excited about this. I got a new dog on Friday.
Awesome. Congratulations.
He's sleeping right now, but maybe you can see him.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that brings me a lot of joy.
Good stuff. Who's next?
I think Leaf has one to close down the show, but in the last week, I had an opportunity to speak to PA Youth Vote, organization of 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and talk to them about judicial gerrymandering. And they ask the best questions. And they are so engaged in what's happening in the state and across the country. And it just always brings me inspiration to talk to the young folks about how they're feeling about the issues, because we're going to count on them to move us along. So that brought me joy last week.
Awesome. Khalif?
It's something somewhat similar to Khadijah's. So we got a mailing list with Common Cause. You can sign up, and we send out updates about things that we're doing. But the email messages that I tend to get from people in general That's my son. That's another joy right there. That's the other joy.
That's right.
And people will just there's still such a genuine interest in democracy, and there's a genuine appreciation for those who are still fighting for it. You know, there are times, I think all of us on the panel can agree, that you just feel like crap, you know, like it's just so much coming at you and you feel like you can just be overwhelmed at any single moment. But it just takes one letter from one person, one email message saying, hey, I didn't see what you're doing. Thank you. I truly appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much. And those emails just make my day. I don't get a lot of them, but I get enough to keep me doing the work that I do. So that's my what is it? A hot take? What is it? What is it?
It brings you joy.
That's my joy. Okay, y'all did the hot take at the beginning. Okay, yeah, that's my joy, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's why we do that. See, like, you know, Miracle has this, you know, this magical superpower. You know what I'm saying? And we kind of like get all deep and real intellectual and philosophical, and we end it. You know what I'm saying? You know, on that positive note. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been such an enlightening and educational conversation. Khadijah Kenner from the PA Budget and Policy Center, thank you so much. Marie Albajes from PA Spotlight, and Khalif Ali from Common Cause joining us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to continuing this conversation later this year, and please come back soon. Thank you so much. And again, that was Khadijah Kenner, Khalif Ali, and Marie Albajes, three of the state's leading experts on judicial gerrymandering. And Marie's done incredible reporting and journalistic work, and the advocacy that Khadijah and Khalif are doing, you know, has shown in just the level of support that has come out to stop, you know, this from happening, this bipartisan table that Khadijah talked about. So wow, what a great conversation. You know, season 2 of the Power Hour, you know what I mean, smashing season 1, man. Wow, you know what I mean. Wow, what an incredible season so far. Yeah, I
didn't even realize season 1 never ended. I didn't know.
I know, right? I was like,
oh, we kind of got like new graphics and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you know, like that's kind of like the signal of season 2.
Switch to StreamYard from BeLive. It's like the change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You've been making changes, you know.
That was our point. Pennsylvania keeps creating new legislation, and so I guess we should be happy because that keeps us employed and we have stuff to talk about. But yeah,
right.
We've consistently been, it's been over 6 months. We've done shows like every single Monday without a break. And we've even had some special elections. So we've done shows 2 or 3 times in a week. We've even had some special interviews. So like we're out here doing the work. And again, we invite all these elected officials to come on the platforms. We understand some of the PA GOP is not really doing a lot of media, but we invite any and all folks to come on the platform to talk about the policies that they're putting forth in the legislature. And that's what we're here for. So people can talk directly to the people and we can ask the important questions, and we need to know what's going on.
Yeah, I think, we definitely need to check the actual dates. I think we're actually coming pretty close to a year already, because I mean it's February and I think we started in April or May, so we're like 9 or 10 months in. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal. Yeah, that's crazy to believe. You know what I mean? You know, get death, taxes, and Power Hour on Monday night are things you can depend on. I guess, and Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl. I guess that's the other thing. You know, the four things in life we can depend on. See, like it doesn't bother me. I'm a baseball guy, so I'm actually kind of happy. You know what I mean?
Nah, you heard me with the last one, Shahari. That we didn't have to bring that up.
I'm a baseball guy, you know, which I guess I shouldn't be happy.
Yeah, if you're a baseball guy, look at the Pirates. Like,
right, yeah, I guess I shouldn't be happy.
You got nothing to be happy about that.
But there's an old saying. You know, I don't know if you ever heard this old saying. You know, a bad day at the ballpark beats a good day at the office. So
I'll give you that much.
Yeah, so yeah, well, to everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the latest edition of the One Hood Power Hour. Again, thank you, Khadijah Kenner. Again, give us a shout out in the chat. from the PA about PA Budget and Policy Center, Marie Albajes from Spotlight PA, as well as Khalif Ali for Common Cause. And thank you so much for the great, for the great insight and just the expertise that was brought to the table. And before we leave, shout out to producer John, who's always keeping us on point. And Miracle is going to run down this week's the weekly programming on the One Hood Media Network.
Yes, so we have a lot of stuff going on. So we want to thank you all for tuning in and watching the shows with us. We have a lot of programming. So tomorrow, Tuesday at 2 o'clock for What Black Pittsburgh Needs to Know, we're talking about education. So we're going to have some panelists on who are going to be talking about ways that we can support and protect our youth in this time of COVID-19. If you've been paying attention, there's a lot of discussion about what's going on between PPS. So we have Malcolm Thomas from Reaching Back. We have Dr. Tracy Reed-Armont and from the Grable Foundation, and Tammy Thompson from Catapult Greater Pittsburgh, who is going to be on the show for Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Wednesday, we do have This Week in White Supremacy. That's our fun 18 and up show where we just talk about everything that's been happening in the past week, talking about like white supremacy and why it's important that we name things that are happening in our communities. Thursday at noon, we also have On Tilt, which we talk about the state of mental health, especially particularly in Black America, but we talk about ways that you can protect your mental health, seeking therapy, going for walks, turning things out, prioritizing your life. So as an activist and organizer, I'm doing On Tilt. The third Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock, we do Ask a Black Doctor, so people can talk about COVID-19, vaccines, anything medically related. The second Friday of the month, we have Black Light, where we actually interview local artists and artisans about their work and how they contribute to the region. And the last Saturday of the month, we have the Next Level Slam. It is a national poetry slam where we invite artists to come in and share their poetry, and first prize is $250. In addition, we do have some extra shows coming on this week. We have a partnership with the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, talking about how athletes can speak out against anti-Semitism. I believe that is on Wednesday at 7:30. And we have some other programming as well. So please tune in. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at One Hood Power Hour and at One Hood Media. And so we'll have a lot of shows coming for you, so stay tuned. And next week, we were going to be talking about the Allegheny County Jail. I know a lot of people saw the Public Source article about the restraint chair. So we're going to delve a little more into some criminal justice issues. And we saw in the chat, last thing, make sure to register to vote. But last thing, today is February 7th, which is Black National HIV AIDS Awareness Day. We know that HIV AIDS is still with us. And even though you can live a healthy life with HIV and AIDS, we want to make sure you have the best decisions and best informed information for you to make those decisions. So please make sure you are getting tested. If you are active or thinking about being active, make sure you look up Pepper Prep. And Central Wellness Outreach is a local organization. They do provide free and reduced care for HIV and AIDS medication and testing. And so please reach out to them if you have any questions or concerns about Pepper Prep. And thank you all so much for tuning in and letting me do the rundown.
Absolutely. And shouts out to my cousin, Tracy Reed-Armont, who's going to be on the show tomorrow. What Black Pittsburgh Needs to Know. Just want to, just give a shout out to my cousin. So thank you everyone for joining us again. One more time. Thank you, Khadija Kenner, Khalif Ali, and Marie Albajes for joining us. Thank you, Ryan White. And thank you, Miracle Jones. And this time of the year, always got to remember Jay Dilla. Rest in peace, Jay Dilla. As always, the GOAT. And yeah, and football season's over, so now we can look forward to baseball. So see you next week on the One Hood Power Hour. For Ryan White and Miracle Jones, this is Kahari Mosley. Have a good night. Stay engaged, stay informed, stay safe. Good night.
Good night. I haven't seen Judas in the Black.